Law firm success strategies will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our virtual receptionist team.
How our business works is that we get phone calls all the time. We're there to protect individual rights. We've been a customer of Answering Legal since approximately 2015. They'll answer the call like somebody at Gainsburg Law is ready and willing to answer the phone call. They'll be our virtual receptionist. We can then concentrate on other legal needs. If we have a big trial coming up, if we have depositions we have to take, they're able to patch potential new business. And these new clients get that personal touch of speaking to somebody when they call in.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Werker. I'm the marketing director here at Answering Legal. For a few years now, I've hosted Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast, and I'm excited to share that Everything Except the Law is no longer our company's sole podcast. In fact, this spring and summer, we'll be launching a number of new podcast shows through the Answering Legal Podcast Network. That's saying podcast a lot of times. That is all to say that I'll be hopping on the debut episodes of all the new shows to help our audience get to know our new hosts a little bit more. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming you to the debut episode of the Law Firm Success Strategies podcast, which will be hosted by attorney coach Doug Brown. Welcome to the Answering Legal podcast family, Doug.
Thanks, Nick. I am so grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to bringing my unique perspective on optimizing law practices and the lives of lawyers to the new network.
I am also excited to watch. I tell this to everybody, but I selfishly get to enjoy really great content as I receive it from all of the hosts. So for those who aren't already familiar with you and your work, can you tell us a little bit about your career path and how you became a lawyer coach?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief. Whenever my kids' friends ask them, so what does your dad do? They're like, how much time you got? So I've done a lot of things over the years to get me to where I am today. And today I help law firm leaders achieve peak performance for their firms and themselves so they can do that without burning out and live the life they've always wanted. And I do that because that's kind of been my story of how to achieve peak performance, for myself and strive for that and overcoming burnout and all the stress of building businesses. It all started pretty early. Both my mom and dad were business builders and entrepreneurs, and they kind of cultivated the idea that I could accomplish anything I wanted and to look for better ways to do things and to fall on my face and keep going. And at the same time, this importance of family and having a life, even as I'm working my butt off. And so I started working my butt off as a lawyer for a firm. I had lucky to have a great mentor. And he taught me how to be a well-rounded lawyer, engaged professionally and in the community. And that's where I kind of really started to learn about mentoring. And he's still, a good friend, to this day. But I recognize that being a partner in a big law firm or even a small law firm wasn't really the life I wanted. I wanted to be more back to the business and building and innovating side. And as luck would have it, and being in the right place and making your own luck has been a big part of my story. At about that time, I got recruited to become in-house counsel with a growing logistics and supply chain company. We eventually grew the business from $30 to $300 million and were acquired by a global firm. And when I started there, I thought, I'm going to go be general counsel at a company. That's what I want to do. That's going to be the thing I ought to do. And as I got into it, I got drawn again to the business side. And I learned how to innovate and build and try new things and really learning about how to be a leader and why being a leader was important, both by watching great leaders and by watching and being subject to terrible leaders. But along the way, I was always trying to improve myself and find ways to do new things. So I got into increasingly critical business roles where I eventually went into a hybrid legal business job and of chief of staff for a division, and then into pure business roles, doing startups and turnarounds and rescues of divisions inside of this large company. I eventually got a global job where I was flying. My kids were young, flying all over the world growing this business unit. But something wasn't right, because that was really clashing with the values of being there for my family and my kids. And one thing led to another. And I got the opportunity. I wanted to make more of an impact. I left there in August of 2008. And for those of us who were in 2008, we remember what happened in September when the wheels came off and whatever plan I had was blown to bits. But I had to bounce back, or I'd like to think of it as bounce forward. And that led me into a series of jobs where I got to refine how I innovate. I actually became a professor and program manager, program builder for the MBA program at the Malcolm Baldrige School of Business, where I taught entrepreneurship and leadership and innovation and finance, helping to build that program and teaching adult learners. And that was an amazing experience, because it was building, it was innovating, it was becoming a better leader. And then that led me to a fateful meeting with the then president of the Connecticut Bar Association, where I was just trying to give something back to the Bar Association and teach lawyers about how to run a business. And one thing led to another, and I found myself as the executive director / chief executive officer of the Bar Association, what I affectionately refer to as a bar rescue, where we updated all the processes, procedures, systems, marketing, branding, and gotten them really launched on a path to the success they're having today, using the core business principles that I had learned and applied through the years. And then I had, meanwhile, that led me to be recruited by a good friend of mine, Mark Michaels, who needed to transition his fourth generation family jewelry business with 21 stores in 5 states to his 2 daughters. So I helped him do that and wrap that up just about as the pandemic was on the horizon, and thought, well, what is the most congruent thing for me to do that where I add the highest and best value and get the most personal juice? And that was joining up with my then coach and now business partner, Walt Hampton, at Summit Success. They had started it about 10 years earlier. And so I joined them as their chief learning officer and their head executive coach, developing the practice with specifically my people, which are law firm leaders who know that they need to build and innovate and become better at leaders and have a life that's congruent with their business. So that's probably the shortest I've come with, probably 5 minutes, but that's the closest Reader's Digest I can come up with for the story.
I do like to picture you as a sort of John Taffer of law firms, where you go in and, the whole metaphor, there's I don't know, there's bugs in the bottles, the guys are serving crappy food, and you figure out how to turn it around and really make it a customer-centric firm.
I'd like to think I'm a kind version. Some of my clients have called me kind of like a business therapist for them. And what's interesting is my clients come to me are already, they don't have the bugs in the bottles and all that stuff. On the surface, everything is terrific. And they've got lots of clients, but they're bumping up against these challenges of how to handle all the work, how to manage the people. And they've often built practices that revolve around them. And they start wondering, well, how do I make it not revolve around me all the time so that I can have more time for the things that I really value, which is pretty congruent with, the story that I had in terms of finding that for myself.
So in terms of this podcast, what's your vision for the show? What should our audience expect from law firm success strategies?
Well, I think what they should expect are, real stories from people like them of how they started in a particular place, where they wound up, and how they got there. And we're going to focus on things like that are the top of mind issues right now. Top of mind issues like, how do I manage these different generations effectively? Where should I be spending? Where do I add the most value to my business? And how do I get to focus on that? Of course, part of the answer is people, process, and technology, but about those things, and also about the very important thing that many people talk about it as mental health and wellness, but I like to think about it these days as mental fitness. And those are, as a leader of a law firm, you have to do all the lawyer things. You have to run a business and be a leader and build and, dare I say, kind of lead from the heart, but also like take care of yourself and your people. And my observation is that most lawyers are really good at taking care of everybody else's problems, but not as much themselves. And that impacts their capacity. And I like to call that more of a mental fitness, because it is much more aligned to physical fitness. You always have to work on it. Little improvements are a big thing. And that when you are mentally fit, you are better in all aspects of your life.
So my mentor always tells me I can't transmit something that I don't have. So I know that you're a proponent of taking care of yourself, and I like how you said lead from the heart. So you're obviously going to be taking us inside your lawyer coaching experiences and your breadth of knowledge in your career. Can you give us a recent example of a solution that you were able to provide for an attorney client that feels current, that like you're particularly proud of?
That's kind of hard to choose from, because I'm very careful about who I select as clients, and I'm proud of all the progress that they've made. I think the one example cuts across a couple of clients, and that is providing an outlet for them to look at their team and their team's capabilities in a new way, and to break through some barriers about how to communicate with them, how to engage with them, so they're operating, as a team. And I think the biggest breakthrough and the biggest surprise for them is, they think that we're going to work on, because we do, managing people and leadership and time management, even some marketing. But as we go through the process and we look at making sure their values are in alignment with how they're spending their time, the most persistent thing is getting into the habit of like being self-aware of what's really going on, acting intentionally, and having that ability to respond better to the world around them, respond better to that associate who, asks for the day off at the last minute, or for the partner who's, not behaving well, or for how to build that process so they don't have to do the same thing over and over again. And the key thing is being aware of what's going on and then making an intentional decision, because those are skills that last well beyond any engagement I would have with a client. One of my favorite stories is of client David, who he hired me to help him with succession planning for his firm and time management for himself. And we were about 2 months in, and I said, "How's it going?" Because I always like to start with "How's it going?" And he says, "Today on the way out of the house, my wife said I'm a better person to be around since we started working together." Wow. Because we had talked about how he was showing up at home. And then I had lunch with him a few weeks ago and asked him, kind of 2 years later, what do you see as most valuable? And he says, being intentional and acting acting with purpose of what's going on has been the things that have stuck with him. So those are the things people don't come for me for, but they're foundational skills they need to be able to live a life and build a practice that performs at its peak level and gives them what they really want in life.
Well, I agree with you that when you stop letting your business or your firm run you down, you can show up for your life in like a million other areas, because you're not burnt out, tired, stressed, angry, irritable, all of the other things. And I like your idea of being intentional, because just being present is something for me. I'll talk in the I is something that has worked for me in my personal life as well as in my professional life, because I don't constantly run around like my hair is on fire. And one thing that I know that you do a really good job at is identifying specific flaws with the way that law practices are built. I think in each individual case, you're sort of, I'll say, qualified to identify those. So what type of advice will you be offering to lawyers when it comes to changing the way their practice operates on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really have a vast toolbox of things that we can look at. Everything from, marketing strategies, right clients in the right place, to people strategies, to business processes, all the components. And what I love about what I get to do is I've got enough depth of expertise in each of those areas, but I look at them across all of the functions. So it makes the whole organization work more effectively. So when I go in to look at the flaws that are in how law firms are built, I'm starting with because each client and each lawyer and each audience member starts in a different place. So as we go through the episodes, we'll identify a starting problem and then suggest something to restructure it in a way that is tangible, that they can experiment with. One of the things I learned and taught is this idea of action learning, which is, plan, implement, review, adjust, and continue the cycle. So the advice will be, as an example, we had one of my clients, I may have him on, was having the same conversations over and over again with new clients, and it was consuming a lot of his time. So we talked about what systems and processes could he put in place that could answer a lot of those questions and make his clients feel more cared for and save him time. And so we revamped the intake process and the experience that clients have when they show up at the firm, which caused him to get better quality of clients coming in and also streamlined the process. So because that was the thing that was in the way. So oftentimes, I think that from a format perspective, we're going to talk about what is the problem, what was in the way, where did you wind up, and how did you get there, so that the audience gets specific nuggets they can implement and experiment with in their world.
I like how you put that, because I think people are looking for specific answers to questions that they have. But what I love about podcasts and launching this network is that I can hear somebody's story of success and see how they approached it and hear some tips about mindset. And I can see how I can apply that to my specific situation. And oftentimes I find that people don't actually want you to tell them exactly what to do. They want to see another roadmap and then sort of mold that and put their own spin on it, which I think is what makes having a coach so valuable. Before you implement changes, what I'll say, physically in your law firm, changing processes, changing the way that you do into all of those things, right? The first thing that more often than not has to change is the leader's mindset. So in your opinion, what are some of the most important mindset shifts that the attorneys that you work with who operate these growing law practices need to make?
Yeah, we as lawyers tend to minimize things that seem simple, like mindset shift. And all of these things are not as simple as they seem. A mindset shift requires persistent and consistent training over time, because we're pretty hardwired and conditioned to certain mindsets that don't help us. One of them is having a fixed mindset. I describe this as there's only so much pie to go around, and so I have to make sure I maximize my slice. Where the mindset shift entrepreneurs and lawyers need to have is as a growth mindset. that we can make the pie bigger. Everybody can have a bigger share of whatever it is if we work together to make that done. So switching from a negative, from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And another important one is leaning into making mistakes and learning from mistakes, and they're not to be avoided. I often share the story. I think I'm sure I shared it on one of your podcasts on the product WD-40. Why is it called WD-40? And the truth of the story is the full name is Water Displacement Formula 40, and it's because Formula 39 didn't work. So they tried it 39 times, and the 40th they got it right. And so many lawyers are afraid to try new things for fear of failure and being judged for failing or making a mistake, when ultimately that's the essence of what being a lawyer is. That's why we call it practicing. And the third one is you don't have to do everything yourself. This mindset that I'm doing it myself, therefore I have control, is wrong. Because if you're holding on to certain processes to do it yourself, but you're not getting to it or you're doing it badly, sure, you have control, but what's the quality that goes with it? So it's this mindset of being innovative, looking for new value, how to do things better, this mindset of building something for the future. And honestly, it's acting in alignment with your values and what's important to you. Because so many lawyers fail to do that. They get stuck into responding to the world around them, and they feel something's not right, but they're not sure what it is. And it really causes a deep dissatisfaction. So adopting that growth mindset, that curiosity mindset, and having some courage to look deeply inside and say, what should we be doing here? Those are essential shifts for success.
I have that problem. I'm a very controlling person. I want to do everything myself. And I'll share a personal story, right? We're high on time. First of all, I've never heard you say that WD-40 story before, and I didn't know that. So now I'm very excited. I like to learn new things. That's cool. And I also didn't know that WD stood for water displacement. I feel a little silly, but that's okay. So I would say we're coming up on 3 years that a very important member of my department tendered his resignation. He joined another company, better opportunity, was very happy for him. And rather than replace that person, I took on his job responsibility. Now, I got a little outsourced help in order to complete his tasks, but I didn't fully delegate his duties. And what I didn't realize was that not only did that take away my time, it took away the other guy on my team. And I thought that somehow making us a smaller team was more profitable, that we would be able to do more with less. And that just fundamentally was not true. So I was pushed by, I have a couple of people in charge of me here, thank God, because I need supervision. And I was pushed to hire another person. I'm sure you know Tony. Tony does a wonderful job. Mm-hmm. And we hired a team to replace the original guy who left's responsibilities. I can't wait to hire another person because I have so much on my plate currently. And here's the kicker is that there's a wonderful influencer in our space. Her name is Allison Williams. And she talks about when she gets too busy or too stressed or too overworked, she knows that means it's time to make more money. And what she means by that is hire another person. Because when you hire another person, what you're doing is growing. You're expanding your reach. You're expanding what I'll say output, right? You can do more with more. You can't do more with less. And so when I try to hold on to all of these responsibilities and I don't trust other people to do them, or I don't train other people to do them or empower them to do them, ultimately I'm shackling myself. I'm holding myself back from growing. And I have we're hiring another person, which again, thank God that I am very stubborn, so I was pushed to do this. But everything you just said, I take it to heart very much. I very much agree with this idea that, like, if you're not growing and if you're not looking back and seeing work that you've done and saying like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I wrote that, I'm so embarrassed, that means you're growing. If you can look back and say like, oh, that was a silly mistake, cool, because now you know better. I really like that you put it that way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so many law firm leaders have the same trouble. And honestly, that's one of the things people come to me for, is to figure out, all right, I call it the workflows, or what are the workflows in your practice? So if you need to add somebody, don't just add the same person, especially if somebody leaves. Let's take a fresh look at the workflows. What needs to happen? How do you allocate non-lawyer tasks to non-lawyers? And then how do you balance your wheels so you've got appropriate diversity of thinking and experience, because that improves your team. And so many small law firms are reluctant to hire because they think they have to hire full time. They don't. And they don't see the value in it. And many times hiring is hard. I've made lots of terrible hiring decisions. I've made some good ones. I've kind of figured out what the differences are. And I know how to onboard somebody. So these are the things that building your team is essential. And overcoming back to the mindset is the idea, I'm a golfer. I'm kind of sort of obsessed with golf, but golfers, you think is an individual sport, but it's not. They have caddies, they have trainers, they have nutritionists, they have publicists, they have logistics managers. They support themselves with a whole team. And building your team around you with people who are smarter than you are, who know things that you don't know, I think that's something that a lot of lawyers are struggling with, because they feel like they need to be the smartest person in the room, and that they need to have all the skills of these other people. And what you've illustrated is when you go and hire people who have, different expertise, they free up lots of space for everybody to be more creative and add more value. So it's building your team and looking at your practice as a team sport. That's how you achieve peak performance. The lawyer, I want to bust this myth that peak performance means you're always like operating at optimal productivity. Peak performance is very much like what an athlete has. It's a sine wave. So you have to have the right resources so you can perform at your peak, and then you have to rest and recover. So then you can go perform at your peak again. And aligning those times and those moments with your most, when they most need them, is how I approach peak performance, because that's reality in real life. You don't have people running the Boston Marathon and then running another marathon the next week.
I want to ask you this question. I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I already sort of know your opinion on this, because we've gotten into this on another episode. Mm-hmm. But I sort of want you to expand on it. So obviously generative AI is a huge hot topic right now. This, at the time of recording this, it's May 23rd, 2023. In your opinion, how important is it actually for attorneys to stay up to date right now on adopting and using these generative AI tools?
It's essential. It is bigger than the shift from the mimeograph to the fax machine, or from fax machine to email. And by the way, there's an ethical obligation to stay up to date on technology. Generative AI and AI tools in general are not going to replace lawyers. They're not going to replace paralegals, but they're gigantic accelerators. So things that would take you hours to do can be done in minutes. If I'm much better at editing than I am for writing, so I can take an idea, I can give it to one of these tools. It'll give me an outline and some suggestions, and then I make it my own and I give it, my spin on it. So as a lawyer, we do not put your head in the sand about generative AI. ChatGPT, Google's got a Bard. There are all kinds of things that are out there. Get curious about how you can use it to make yourself more effective and efficient. And I get it, Nick, that bumps up against the hourly model of practice. Well, if I get myself more efficient, then I'm going to make less money. Then it's time to look at how you're making money, because those who adopt this technology and learn how to use it effectively are going to have a gigantic advantage. And AI can be a great equalizer for small firms who don't have the staff, especially litigation firms, firms that deal with contracts and document preparation. There are all kinds of tools and services that are out there already for lawyers to do things like summarize documents and edit documents, or even just as simple as having a tool like Grammarly on your Word or your browser so it makes sure you write more clearly. It's absolutely essential, and it's part of your job of running your business. An effective peak performance practice requires the alignment of people, process, and technology. Technology is an accelerator. And don't be afraid to experiment with it and try a number of things till you'll see what works. It's part of the investment that law firm leaders have to make. Don't take my word for it. Guys like Bill Gates are saying this is absolutely transformational. And a worry I have for lawyers is they are so busy, they won't take the time to understand it, or they're so reluctant to change, and they will judge it as being a lower quality than what they could do. And that misses the point. Because if they can help you analyze it more quickly and communicate it more clearly and concisely, that makes everybody better. I mean, heck, one of the things that lawyers should do is take your engagement letter and run it through one of these tools and ask it about how to make it more clear to somebody without a law degree, maybe somebody without college. And these tools have the ability to do that, which can just illustrate one way to make your life so much better. And I know we're going to have some conversations about specific AI things, because it is where the industry is going. And it's one of the ways that lawyers can set themselves free from the drudgery that they don't really like to do anyway.
Good answer. Going to conclude today with some rapid fire questions so that our audience can get the chance to know the real Doug Brown, the man behind the curtain.
Okay.
Or behind the camera, I guess, so to speak. What is your favorite go-to late night snack?
The problem is I have too many go-to late night snacks. I've been working on that. But if there's ice cream in the house, I will definitely have it.
Ooh, ice cream. I can't, because I got the cleanup. I'm like a chips guy. Favorite leisure activity, even though I know the answer to this?
I love leisure activities where I get to spend time with my people, my friends. So I love to golf and play pickleball.
Ooh, pickleball. I got to get back into pickleball. What's your favorite thing about being a lawyer coach?
I get to work with really smart people who are trying to be leaders from the heart. They are trying to innovate. They're trying to build something, including the life they want. And seeing their transformation when we make some subtle shifts, and then they see the possibilities and know that I have impacted them and their families down the road. That's the most satisfying thing. That's why I do the work that I do. I didn't want to go through my career and come out in my 60s and wonder, what if? I wanted to live my life as I was building my business, and I'm blessed to be able to do that from a beautiful place with people who share my values.
What's the last TV show that you binged?
Ted Lasso.
Oh, yeah, man.
I'd be a goldfish. That the show is so well written and so resonating, and it's a fun show. I've held off on watching the third season because My wife wants to watch and the first two with subtitles so she can understand it better.
Yeah, my wife said the same thing, but then you get used to the accents. So after a couple episodes, I had the same problem with Peaky Blinders. I couldn't understand it for like a while. But you should get caught up on the third season. It's incredible. What common lawyer mistake frustrates you the most?
Not investing in themselves, not believing, but not investing in themselves. And what I mean is the most poignant thing is believing that self-care is selfish. Because when you learn to take care of yourself, and as I've described, mental fitness, you are better in every aspect of your life. So they're spending all their time trying to take care of everybody else, and they're not taking care of their most important asset.
Great answer. What's the last concert you went to?
Bruno Mars.
Ooh, very cool.
Great showman. Oh my goodness.
Great talent. The voice on that guy, man. Last one. Why should lawyers take the time to listen to your new podcast?
I'm going to offer insights and perspectives that I think are different and are particularly valuable and useful. And I'm going to give lessons that I give with my private coaching clients in real life. Because I only work with a very select few number of clients, and I want to be able to reach more people. So this is real stuff, as if it might be a coaching session if you had a coach. Right there on the podcast, free for you to enjoy and try. And that's kind of my vision of why it's worth listening to, because you'll get a nugget. You'll get something you can use that you might not have thought of before.
That's why I love podcasts, is I feel like I'm part of like an intimate conversation instead of just reading something. It just provides that sensation of having a conversation with somebody, which I think is very helpful to the listener. So that's all for this episode of Law Firm Success Strategies. Doug is now taking over the hosting duties. So Doug, here's your host hat. I know I will be watching, and you can all follow along with the new episodes too on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. For more information about our podcast network, visit answerinlegal.com, and we hope to see you next time, everyone.